So what do you do with all of these old maps that you've collected through the years, or perhaps seen them in thrift shops? Well, there are so many things you can do with these. Some of the graphics on these maps are wonderful, and they are just timeless. So I just respect the fact that people have saved these through the years. Even though you may not use maps anymore, especially since we have our GPS these days, these make wonderful paper to craft with. So let me show you what I do with some of my old maps. Now the maps are folded perfectly to create journals. So what I do is I open them up, and if you're lucky, these will fold right into pages. So as you can see here, let me see if I can get this figured out. This is one page right here. So you want to be strategic when you cut up your mat to make sure that you have pages that fold over. Now you're going to have plenty of pages, so don't worry if you lose some of the pages, because some of the pages you want to actually use to decorate your book. So that's what I did, is I went ahead and I cut up this Texas map, and then I trimmed it accordingly, because keep in mind, when you use bulky paper, your paper is going to not be exactly the same, because as you add more paper, of course, the outside flaps tend to get smaller because of the bulk. So the first thing you want to do is, after you cut it, is figure out how you're going to have your layout. Now, one thing I noticed when I was putting this map together, because the way maps are folded, some of your pages will be upside down. So for instance, in order to get this part of the map right side up, this part was upside down. But I wasn't too worried about that, because I knew that I was going to be covering some of these pages. So the way that I approached it is I made sure that my images on the outside, so when I fold it over, were right side up, and then the images on the inside, some of them are upside down, which is, I was fine with that. The other thing you need to do is keep in mind, a lot of these maps have been folded for years and years, so you may have to reinforce your creases. So I did that with just some tissue tape. Now you can use binding tape, you can use washi tape, there's lots that you can use, but I wanted to make sure that my pages were still somewhat flexible, so I chose to go with the tissue tape. And then, as you can see here, I did create some pockets with some of the pages, and on this one here, I also, let's see if I can find it, I also created a pocket. And I'll be creating more of these as I decorate this book, but I just kind of wanted to show you what you can do with some of the extra paper. So once you get your book together, make sure that you pull out some of the paper to be able to decorate with. Alright, so once you have all your pages together, the next thing you need to do is you need to cut holes to be able to sew your journal together. And I do that with my awl here. But if you have a thick needle, you can easily do it with a needle as well. So I figure out exactly where I want the holes to be. And I just take one of the pages, and I'm not specific about this. I mean, you can certainly measure it up and figure out exactly where the center is, but I just eyeball it. So this is about where my center is, right here. And then I want to come in about an inch. So maybe right here. And again, like I said, if you want to be exact, certainly do what makes you comfortable. Alright, so now I have the 3 holes, and if you feel that you need more reinforcement, you know, you can put more holes in as well, but typically I'll just use 3 holes for my journals. And then once you have your initial template, I'll grab a few pages, not too many, because I want to make sure I'm exact, and I'll use the hole that I've created to put the holes through the other pages. All right, so once you have all of the holes in your pages, then you're going to be ready to sew it. Now for the outside binding, because I knew that this needed to be very secure, I used some fabric tape from Tim Holtz versus the thin tissue tape, because I wanted this to be a little bit more secure. You could use book binding, there's lots of things that you can use, but I wanted it to be a little bit decorated, so I used the binding tape, or fabric tape I should say. And now it's a matter of just sewing my book together. Now these clips here are great. You can get these at any office store, and they're called binding clips, and they work wonderfully to be able to hold your journal pages together. So you just want to make sure that you have your pages exactly the way that you want them, and then you want to bind all 4 sides. These clips come in different sizes, so you should be able to find what you need. And I'm just grabbing the ones that are on my desk. That's why you see that they're different sizes. Now remember, you have those holes that are pre-cut, so you want to make sure that you line this up as straight as possible. So that way when you do your sewing, the holes will line up. All right, I think that's pretty good. Now I know a lot of book binders measure out their thread, but typically I'll keep it on the spool because I'm not always sure exactly how much I need, but I think the rule is probably 3 lengths of your book. And then I have these needles that come in all different sizes, so I'm gonna find a long one, but not too overly thick. All right, put those aside, and now I'm ready to thread my needle. Now the thread that I'm using is wax thread. You can buy unwaxed thread and wax it yourself, but I do highly recommend that you use the wax thread because it makes going through the holes in the binding a lot smoother. All right. So I start on the inside, and if you've lined up your book correctly, it should go through your pages pretty easily. And the wax thread makes a huge difference. All right. So I'm just going to continue to thread this, hopefully matching up the holes that I've pre-poked. And then your last stitch goes right through that same hole that you used in the middle. And this is where we're going to tie it off. All right, so as you can see, you're going to end up with 2 pieces here, and I actually had a little bit more than I needed, so I will just adjust it. But like I said, some people will pre-measure their thread. I don't typically do that. All right, so now that we have our book bound, we don't really need these anymore, so I'll just pull those off. But you want to make sure that your thread is tight, because remember, this is what's going to keep your pages together. And then from here, you're going to want to tie a knot. Now I like my knot to be in the middle, so sometimes I will just kind of help it along by putting the thread underneath, so that way I know my knot will be in the middle. And then I just double knot it. Okay. And now you have a bound book. And you can create, you know, I mean, there's a lot you can do with this. You can create a little clasp if you want to. You can put eyelets to close it. You know, an easy clasp just like this would be perfect. But there's a lot you can do with this. And once you have it bound, then you can just decorate it up however you want to. I mean, you can use it as a junk journal if you wanted to, adding pieces of junk along the way. You can create more pockets as you're traveling. You can put notes. So for instance, if you wanted to put some plain paper here to be able to type notes, you can do that as well. But there's a lot that you can do with this. And then not only that, but with some of your extra maps, you can create envelopes or pockets that would be great for this. So this is just one idea of what you can do with some of your old maps. I hate throwing away items from the past, especially when they're as great as this. Because there's just so much you can do. The paper is sturdy enough that you can do mixed media on it. You can add ephemera pieces. You can do layering. There's just so much you can do. So I hope that this gives you an idea of what you can do with some old maps, and just use your imagination. I just think that, you know, why throw away the past when we can recreate it and use it in our present and our future. Now, I do have hundreds of these maps. I actually got them from a thrift shop that was getting ready to throw them out, and I just couldn't let that happen. So I got them, and I have them here in my craft room. So I'm going to list some of these in my shop, and if you're interested in trying to put one of these books together, but you don't have any maps, check out my shop, because I'm going to go ahead and be listing all of my maps. It's not something that I've done because I've had these maps for quite some time, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do that, just so you guys can play along and try to create your own map junk journals. All right, guys, I hope that you've enjoyed my idea, and I hope you all have a wonderful crafty day. We'll see you again next time.